A peaceful neighborhood, a powerful woman, and a veteran. This confrontation will lead to the downfall of a tyrant. Before we begin, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so we can continue making videos like this. I am a veteran who served for many years and decided to move to a quiet residential area to enjoy my retirement. This neighborhood is known for its lush green trees, uniformly painted white houses, and neatly trimmed lawns, as if maintained by the hands of skilled gardeners. The streets are paved with clean bricks, where children often ride their bikes, and elderly residents take their morning strolls. I was looking forward to peaceful days, breathing in the fresh air, and spending leisurely afternoons on my porch. However, from the moment I arrived, I sensed an unspoken control that loomed over this neighborhood. The houses were eerily quiet. A few neighbors came to greet us, but they also gave me a warning. There was a powerful woman in the whole homeowners association, whom they called Karen, and she would soon take notice of me. I didn't pay much attention to it, but I never expected what was coming, and it was far from pleasant. Soon after moving in, I realized something was off. A notice had been taped tightly to my front door. The paper was printed in bold letters, neatly aligned, but it carried a cold and authoritative tone. Opening it, I read the words. M.R. Carter. Our neighborhood has strict regulations to maintain its peace and aesthetic appeal. Please take note of the following. The garage door must not be used after 9 p.m. Vehicles may not be parked in front of the house for more than 1 hour. Only HO-approved plants may be grown in front yards. Sincerely, Selena, HO President. I frowned, crumpling the paper and tossing it into the trash. This is ridiculous, I muttered. But the very next day, as I bent down to pick up a package I had received from the post office, I felt a pair of eyes staring at me. Looking up, I saw a middle-aged woman with blonde hair tied up in a tight bun, standing with her arms crossed right in my front yard. Her expression was full of arrogance and disapproval. I sighed, immediately knowing who she was. Trying to remain polite, I nodded and greeted her. Good afternoon, Ma. Is there something I can help you with? Before I could say anything more, she spoke in a sharp, condescending tone. Mr. Carter, I see you have not followed the whole notice. I don't understand, Mom, I replied, already tired of this interaction. She hadn't even bothered with a proper introduction, as if I should automatically know who she was. You are not allowed to park here, Karen shrieked at me in a raspy, high-pitched voice. Your car is ruining the neighborhood's aesthetics. Then, she marched to the front of my house, pointing at a tree and yelling again. And get rid of that ugly tree, Mr. Carter. You are required to plant only HO-approved trees. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I looked at where my car was parked. It was sitting neatly in my own driveway, right in front of my house, without obstructing any public path. As for the tree, whole regulations. What a load of nonsense. Are you kidding me? I exhaled, keeping my voice steady. This is my house. I have every right to park my car in my driveway. And the tree? It was here long before I moved in. Karen smirked, her eyes full of challenge. I don't think you understand the whole rules. If you don't comply, I will have to issue an official warning. I stared at her, a faint smile appearing on my lips. I don't think this is important enough to report. I shrugged. But go ahead and do whatever you feel is necessary. I opened the door and stepped inside, leaving her standing there, seething, her hands clenched tightly as if struggling to contain her anger. I knew this wasn't the end of it. One morning, I stood on my porch, carefully fastening the American flag to the newly installed flagpole. The light morning breeze swept through, making the flag wave proudly. I gazed at it, feeling a surge of pride swell in my chest. To me, this flag was more than just a symbol. It represented the years I had served in the military, the comrades who had fallen, and the ideals I had devoted my life to protecting. I took a step back, admiring my work with a satisfied smile. But less than a minute after I stepped inside, a sharp sound rang out, the forceful, angry pounding of a fist against my door. I sighed and slowly opened it. Standing before me was Karen, her face twisted in a scowl, her fingers gripping a piece of paper tightly. Her eyes burned with a hostile determination. "Mr. Carter," she snapped, "you're violating the whole rules again. Section 13.5 clearly states, no political or religious symbols may be displayed in front of a house." I crossed my arms and met her gaze calmly. "First, I'm not part of your whole. Second, the American flag is not a political symbol. It's the national flag, and I have every right to fly it." Karen took a deep breath, her voice low and firm. "Well, to me, it is. The hoe is not optional, it's mandatory, and the hoe does not allow it. If you don't take it down immediately, I will fine you $500. I shook my head, a faint smile forming on my lips. "You don't have the authority to do that. This is my land, my home, and no one can stop me from flying my country's flag." Karen gritted her teeth, her eyes flashing with frustration. "Do you think you're special? I won't let you disrupt this neighborhood. Well, see who comes out on top." She turned sharply on her heel and walked away, her high heels clicking against the pavement with cold precision. That very afternoon, I received an official warning letter from the Hull. I opened the envelope indifferently, skimming the overly aggressive wording. It threatened fines if I didn't comply with the Ho's regulations. I chuckled softly, wondering if Karen realized how ridiculous she was being. In the following days, I noticed a shift in how my neighbors looked at me. Some avoided me when passing by, while others glanced at me warily. They deliberately distanced themselves, even when I greeted them. It wasn't hard to figure out why. Karen must have spread rumors or issued some directive to punish me. She had likely painted me as a troublemaker, a defiant rule breaker in their so-called perfect neighborhood. Every time I stepped outside, I could see her watching me from a distance, arms crossed over her chest, a smug half-smile playing on her lips. She was waiting for me to slip up, to bow to her absurd authority. But I wasn't someone who could be bullied. I had been through war, through real confrontations. A local hoe was nothing compared to what I had faced. And Karen, with all her spite and obsessive control, had no intention of backing down from this battle. One day, as I watered my front yard, enjoying a peaceful afternoon, a sharp, piercing sound filled the air. The blare of a police siren. I looked up to see a patrol car pulling up in front of my house. Two officers stepped out, their expressions serious. And right beside them, standing on the curb with her arms crossed, was Karen. A victorious smirk tugged at her lips, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. She thought she had finally cornered me. I stood up straight, calmly setting down the watering can, knowing that Karen's performance was about to begin. But she didn't know that I was ready for my response. Karen rushed forward, her face triumphant as she saw the police car stop in front of my house. She hurried toward it, pointing at me as if accusing a dangerous criminal. "It's him. I want him punished immediately for violating whole regulations. I've warned him multiple times, but he deliberately defies the rules," Karen declared smugly. The two police officers exchanged glances. One of them, seemingly the senior officer, stepped forward and asked, "Who made this report?" Karen lifted her chin, placing her hands on her hips. "Me. I represent the whole, and I have sufficient evidence to prove that he is in violation." I waited for her to finish her nonsensical arguments before inviting the officers into my house. Karen followed, though no one welcomed her. The surrounding residents, curious and eager for gossip, also entered my house. I ignored them. After all, a good show was about to unfold. Once inside, I slowly reached for the jacket I often wore. I sighed and deliberately pulled a military badge from my pocket, holding it out in front of me. Immediately, one of the officers straightened up, his expression shifting to one of respect. The tall officer furrowed his brows and looked at Karen, his voice lowering. "Do you even know who he is?" Karen pouted, crossing her arms. "Whoever he is, he still has to follow Ho rules. I don't care who he is. You need to arrest him immediately." The officer sighed, took out his phone, and opened a legal document. He read it aloud so that everyone around could hear clearly. According to Federal Law 4 U.S. Code 8, no organization can prohibit the display of the American flag on private property. Preventing or penalizing this act is a violation of federal law. Silence fell. Karen's face paled, her eyes darting anxiously. Her hands trembled as she struggled to find an excuse but couldn't utter a word. But that wasn't the worst part for her. The officer continued, "Furthermore, Mr. Carter is not just a veteran, he is a Medal of Honor recipient. That means he is granted special legal protections. You have just committed a federal offense by harassing a veteran." The residents started murmuring. Someone whispered, "We're witnessing a major case here." Some people pulled out their phones to record the entire event. Karen stammered, her eyes widening in shock. I, I didn't know. I just thought." The officer stared at her sternly and asked, "You claim to be the whole president. How do you not know federal law?" Karen faltered, unable to form a response. There was no way she could admit that she was an ignorant and incompetent whole president. The other officer stood up and said bluntly, "Not knowing the law doesn't mean you didn't break it, Mom. And now, you will face the consequences." Karen turned even paler, her voice trembling. I, I didn't know. I just thought." The officer held his sharp gaze. "You will face the consequences for harassing a veteran and violating federal law. We will file a report and escalate this to our superiors. You will also be required to attend a hearing regarding your actions." "No, no way. You can't do this. I am the whole president," Karen shrieked, struggling as the officer tried to restrain her. I stood still, watching her. It was laughable how she believed her whole rules could override federal law. Maybe today, she would finally learn a lesson she would never forget. I feel that a whole president like this could be harmful to the residents in the neighborhood. She doesn't even know the law. That's dangerous. I put on a genuinely concerned expression. "Exactly," the officer added. "To prevent further negative impact on the community, you will be required to issue a public apology to Mr. Carter in front of all the neighborhood residents. This is not just our request, but the bare minimum of respect owed to a man who has served this country." Karen bit her lip, looking around, but no one spoke up to defend her. A neighbor finally said, "Yes, she owes Mr. Carter an apology." Karen reluctantly took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am sorry, Mr. Carter. I was wrong. I shouldn't have acted that way." I crossed my arms, calmly looking at her. "An apology doesn't erase what you did, but at least it's a start. I hope you think carefully before trying to control others in the future." Karen lowered her head, saying nothing more. Silence lingered as the officer recorded the case and then left. The crowd gradually dispersed, but everyone understood that this was the end of Karen's reign in the neighborhood. In the following days, the whole held a meeting to vote on Karen's removal. The meeting took place at the community center, where residents gathered to make an important decision. The atmosphere was heavy as Karen walked in, her face stiff, still trying to maintain a confident facade. A management board member stood up and spoke in a stern voice. "Who agrees to remove Selena from her position as whole president?" Within seconds, nearly every hand was raised. Some people even looked directly at Karen with fury in their eyes. No one stood by her side. Karen sat there, her face pale, lips pressed tightly together, but unable to fight back. In the end, she stood up, casting a bitter glance at me before silently walking out of the meeting room. It was like a dam breaking. A few days later, she received a lawsuit. The residents who had suffered from her harassment joined forces and filed a complaint with the local court. Because of this, Karen was fined thousands of dollars for abuse of power and deliberately violating the rights of the residents. Unable to afford the penalties, she was forced to sell her house to pay off the lawsuit. A for sale sign was posted right in front of her door, a testament to the complete downfall of the one who had once ruled over the whole. On the day she left, the sky was overcast, as if the weather itself reflected her failure. No one in the neighborhood helped as she quietly packed her belongings. The residents stood at a distance, watching without a single word of farewell. Karen pulled her suitcase toward her car, glancing around as if expecting someone to say something, but no one did. Finally, her eyes landed on me. Bitterness and anger flickered across her face, but so did a hint of helplessness. I remained standing there, calm as always, saying nothing. As Karen's car disappeared from the neighborhood, I turned around and raised the American flag, just as I did every morning. A neighbor approached me and asked, "Do you feel sorry for her?" I gave a small smile, my gaze fixed on the flag fluttering in the wind. "No, I only see that justice has finally been served." What do you think of this story? Let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to follow us for more compelling stories.